What is the most horrific thing you have witnessed in school? Please like and subscribe to support this channel. When I was in the 2nd grade or so, I go to the bathroom and there is this young, naked boy standing in there at one of the urinals. I'd estimate he was maybe 4 to 5 years old. Now, he is bare-ass naked. Not a stitch of clothes on. They aren't even lying anywhere in the room, so I have no idea what's up. He turns around and I am exposed to the full extent of his nudity. He begins crying. I run out of the bathroom in horror. 2nd grade. A pedophile guy on the far side of the playground motioned over to us and said if we'd like to have some candy. He said it was in his car across the street and we'd be back in time for class. Next thing I know, the guy we were talking to is speared by the janitor fucking Goldberg style, jumpsuit and all. My friends and I are 7 years old and totally confused by what's going on. The janitor is raining blows upon the pedophile's head while kicking the shit out of his groin. Forgot to mention that the janitor was a Spanish dude who used to play soccer professionally. Afterwards, we went back to class with the most badass story ever. This was back in the 80s, so there were no grief counselors or trauma therapists or anything. Teachers asked if we were okay and they called our parents to let them know. It really was just a normal fight in school. It was really just the flat-out meanness of the gangbanger dude that floored me. There was this scrawny nerd standing in an alcove by the vending machines. This was right after lunch and they sort of kept us penned up in the entrance hall of high school waiting for the other classes to let out before we could leave. We're talking standing room only for about 300 kids. Just minding his own business, the gangster wannabe, I lived in a rich suburb, gets in his face and tells him buy him a soda. The kid mumbles and starts to walk away with his head down. So the gangster kid shoves him into the wall and starts doing some sort of retard gangster punch. Words really fail me as I try to describe the way he was trying to punch him. It kind of looked like some sort of mini fist pump hitting the geek in the back of the head. He was just rotating his arm at the elbow in circles. This of course makes people go nuts. They start screaming all the usual dumb shit kids say when there's a fight and they form a circle. This of course immediately bring down the security guards. I think we had the guards there to protect the innocent children against terrorizers and pedophiles than preventing violence, but they quickly pull them apart. This is where this gets bad. So there were 2 guards and one had the geeky kid in some kind of hold where his arms were behind his back. The other guard however was just holding on to the asshole's wrist. I knew what was going to happen even before it did. It may sound racist, but the guards were always friendly to the wannabe gangsters in the school, probably because the kids acted like the guards actually were. From a rough side of the tracks, into hip-hop and other urban culture. I'm not saying he let the kid go, but I'm sure he would have had him in a better hold than just his fucking wrist if they weren't friends. So the gangster kid yanks his arm out of the guard's hand and throws a fucking massive punch to the geeky kid's face. He had this huge fucking ring on and it tore this kid's face open so badly I thought he put his eye out. I'll never forget how the blood sprayed out of his face like it was a scene in fucking Fight Club. The worst part was that he had enough time before the guard grabbed him again to hit him in the face again. It was way weaker, but for fuck's sake. The crowd gasped and sort of went quiet and they dragged both of them away. The geeky kid just sort of went into shock and hung there loosely and the gangster kid just went silent. After they were gone, some girl started freaking out over the blood that had gotten on her shoe, but I'm pretty sure it was for attention. The geeky kid to my knowledge never came back to school, but I think he was in a lower grade than me. The gangster kid was back though. I don't think he ever graduated though. TLDR*, I saw a kid being held back by a security guard get his face ripped open by a gangster kid as the other guard just stood and watched. High school. I was headed to the office at the end of the day to pick up something my mom dropped off for me. I was stopped about 20 feet from the office and told I had to wait. I saw something spilled on the ground that looked like a cherry slushie or something and I was pretty pissed about not being able to pick up my stuff. I remember saying something like, "What the hell? I can just walk around the mess." The teacher insisted that I had to turn around and wait. He made me go outside. A few minutes later, ambulances and the police showed up. It turns out a kid, that I had grown up with, was stabbed and ended up dying. It was his blood on the floor. I went to a pretty small school where this kind of stuff just didn't happen. It ended up tearing our community apart. I was at Virginia Tech during the shooting. I wasn't in any of the classrooms or anything that were attacked, but I saw all of the ambulances roll up as well as the police cars. I had a friend who was on the volunteer rescue squad that went into the buildings where the shootings occurred, and he said that the worst part of the whole thing was all of the cell phones on the ground or in people's bags going off as their parents frantically tried to get a hold of them. 4th grade. The class comes back from recess and the entire classroom reeks of shit. Literally feces. We all sit down, when the teacher announces to the class that a fellow student of ours would no longer be in our class. Apparently, during the recess hours, said individual had crept into the classroom and not only taken a huge dump in another kid's lunchbox, but also smeared feces all over the back walls in the area where everyone's backpacks hung. To this day I still would like to know why this kid did this. I will never forget that. Never forget. Even though the space shuttles take off from the coast, you can still see them going up in Central Florida. In 2nd or 3rd grade, one was going off, and after watching the initial part of the launch on TV, we went out to the playground to see the rest. The fun was interrupted by kids asking why it was going in so many directions and by the teachers rushing us back inside. That shuttle was the Challenger. While running the mile in 6th grade PE, a friend of mine, Kim, was complaining about not being able to breathe and asked the PE teacher if she could sit down. The teacher, thinking this 11-year-old girl was feigning injury, said no and instructed her to continue running. Finishing our 2nd lap, Kim again asked the PE teacher, between gasps of breath, if she could sit down. The teacher said, no, again. Kim tried to resume running, stumbled and fell face first into the ground. The PE teacher yelled at us to keep running as she leaned down to examine Kim. Finishing my 3rd lap, I was met with the most horrific thing I ever witnessed in school. Kim was on her back, her face looked like a blueberry muffin. That yellow-wide doughy color with purple and blue blotches. My best friend was running like a bat out of hell towards the school, and my PE teacher was completely ashen and shaking, looking around with wide eyes. Within moments the rest of our class had surrounded Kim as another PE teacher began performing CPR. EMTs arrived, with the principal, and Kim was loaded up into the ambulance. She was announced dead at the scene. TLDR, childhood friend turns into a blueberry muffin, dies. Back in elementary school, around 1st grade, there was a kid who would always get hurt. There were 2 times specifically that I remember pretty well. The first time, we were in the cafeteria after school while waiting for the school bus. The tables had those circular seats that came out from the underside of the table. Well, he was running around the table for some reason. Don't remember if chasing, being chased or anything, and he suddenly tripped and fell. When he got up, I saw that he was crying profusely while holding his arm out. He had knocked the elbow joint halfway up his forearm and on the other side. At least that's what it looked like to my 6-year-old eyes. The second incident I recall from this kid was the same year. He was running around the classroom with scissors. He tripped and fell onto the scissors. The scissors came to about 2 to 3 inches away from his heart. I'm not sure in what order these 2 accidents happened, but one thing's for sure, that kid was clumsy as hell. I've posted this before, but this one got to me the most. The worst thing I have ever witnessed was in 5th grade. It's worth prefacing that I went to a great school. Teachers cared, and it was generally a wonderful environment for a kid to learn. Then came along this new kid, Chuck, great guy, but definitely a little off. He was pudgy, used an extensive vocabulary heavily inspired by fantasy novels, and was simply an unusual kid. At the time he had all the showings of future LARPer. If I recall, he had maybe 3 friends. Everyone else made fun of him relentlessly, bullied him, harassed him, and made his life a living hell. Sadly, nothing particularly out of the ordinary for kids that age. Well, one lunch Chuck was celebrating his birthday with a couple of his good friends, probably chugging chocolate milk and talking like Yoda or something, when his best friend, Jeff, comes running in from outside, face lit up with glowing excitement, saying that he had a birthday surprise for Chuck. Chuck's eyes widened and he and Jeff bolted outside to the playground. The moment the door shut behind him, you could see his face go ghostly pale. What seemed like the entire grade was standing outside and began to pelt him with rocks. The kid was curled up in the fetal position, and the little shits just closed in on him, fighting for a better angle at him. For what seemed like minutes, Chuck was bombarded with stones before the kids just kind of walked away. I recall 1 or 2 spitting on him as they left, but I swear that image of him curled up in a ball, bruised up and sobbing uncontrollably was one of the most heart-wrenching things I have ever seen. The kid couldn't stop crying for the remainder of the day. My friend spoke to him on the way home, and I guess that while the cuts and bruises were bad, what hurt him the most was that he felt truly hated. He knew he was a misfit but never thought he was despised to the extent that he was. Worst of all, the real icing on the sadness cake was that it was apparently organized by his ex-best friend Jeff. In a desperate attempt at popularity, in a matter of 20 minutes at recess he sold his friend down the river, spread a multitude of awful rumors, shared all his secrets and organized a class-wide stoning. Of all the fucked up things I have seen, this was a lasting lesson for me in mob mentality and the effects of bullying. It remains one of the more disturbing memories I have. Anyways, as kind of an aftermath, inexplicably I recall nobody getting in trouble. Chuck never said a damn thing about it, just spent the day in the nurse's office and went home. His parents pulled him out of school shortly after, miraculously without incident. The dad was a lawyer. Last I heard, Jeff, the scumbag turncoat friend, is now a heroin addict, and Chuck graduated from an Ivy League school, got fit, is in a kick-ass band and has a great job in politics. Karma at its finest. A chica fight wherein one of the girls hid razor blades in her hair. The other girl grabbed a fistful of course, and cut the shit out of her hand. So while she's in a second of shock from that, the other girl knocks her down and repeatedly slams her face into the concrete. On about the third slam, as she was pulling her face back up, a big flap of forehead skin flopped down and blood started sprinkling everywhere. Arizona, FTW. This kid about 8 years old was climbing a chain link fence in our school because a tennis ball managed to get stuck miraculously near the top. His feet slip and he starts falling, ripping his shorts on the way down on those pieces of sharp wrapped metal that hold the fence to the support poles. On further inspection, turns out his ballsack was also sliced open on the way down. Painful and embarrassing. Poor guy. I remember driving to high school shortly after I got my license. When I pulled up in the parking lot and started looking for a spot, a young girl gunned her car through the parking lot and sort of ramped it off a curb and intended to drive it into the side of a building. But instead of impacting into the building, the car sort of drove along the side of the building like a stunt from some Hollywood movie and left tire marks high up on the wall. Her car kept going and rolled once before landing on a chain link fence by the football field. It was especially horrific to hear that she was pregnant and was trying to commit suicide. In high school, during class 1 headed to the bathroom and I noticed a bunch of bloody footprints on the ground. Curiosity got the best of me, so I followed them and they led straight to the nurse's office where there was a kid laying there with a pen stabbed right through the kid's foot. Turns out the kid thought that if a pen was standing straight up, he could jump on it off of a desk and it would crush like a pop can. No. In high school about age 15 in the mid-80s, best friend had managed to sneak some liquid prong, any clear alcohol mixed together, into school. He and a girl he was crushing on get fairly sloshed at lunch and start sucking face in the gym. I'm sitting about 3 feet from them as they attempt to suck out each other tonsils. One of them, I'll never know which one, pukes. All you see is 2 bulging eyes as their lips separate with a fountain of puke flying out of both mouths. Much vomiting resulted. When I was around 9 or 10, my friend and I were sat on a bench in the playground. A kid a couple of years younger than us sprints towards the toilets. He gets intentionally tripped by another child of the same age. His head lands on the concrete corner of the step. He lies prone for a bit. By the time he gets up there is a large gash, more hole actually, just above his eye. The blood hasn't started running out of the wound yet and there was a lot of white stuff I'm assuming was his skull. The child had done the trip, ran away pretty quickly, we didn't even notice he'd gone. I was walking across a gym during gym class when a kid threw a basketball and hit a light on the ceiling. Now these lights were gym lights, huge and with a metal grating on them, and it was 30 to 40 feet up. It came down right behind me so close that the edge of the grating ripped 3 clean slices in the back of my shirt. If I had been an inch back I'm sure I would have been sliced open in 3 places. If I was a foot behind I'd just be dead. Final Destination movies scare me now. During the first week of my freshman year in college, I was jolted awake early in the morning by a loud crash in the bathroom of my suite-style dorm. I decided to get up and check it out. The shower was running, but nobody responded when I knocked, so I opened the door. My suite mate was lying half out of the shower, stark naked and convulsing violently, her eyes rolling up in her head and spittle foam pouring out of her mouth. Blood was everywhere. I yelled for my sleeping roommate to call 911 and dragged the suite mate out of the shower. turned her on her side and tried to pour the fluids out of her mouth so she could breathe again. I'll never forget how terrified I was during those agonizing 10 minutes waiting for the paramedics to show up, holding this girl in my lap as she went through rapid spine-snapping convulsions, gasped for air, spoke nonsense syllables, and covered us both with her blood and spittle. I thought I was watching her die. Turns out she had epilepsy and hadn't gotten around to telling us yet. She collapsed in the shower and hit her head on something on the way down. She ended up being okay, but she had 5 more seizures in the shower of our dorm before freshman year was over, and I was always the one to discover her. Goddamn paramedics made fun of my zebra print Snuggie every time. In 6th or 7th grade we had co-ed swimming as a part of PE. Generally PE had several classrooms of children mixed together, so you'd have a couple dozen kids in a given class. And we had to wear the official school swimming outfit, which consisted of a one-piece for the girls and what was basically a Speedo for the boys. It sucked, but whatever, swimming is fun. The initial swimming training required a demonstration of first aid and what should be done if something went wrong. They get to the part about what happens if someone sustains any head or spinal injury, and they pull out that long board with cutouts along its edge. They want to demonstrate how a victim needs to get strapped to this board and have their head immobilized with one of these. They ask for a volunteer and my friend, Steve, gets picked. He lies on his back atop the board, they secure his head between the foam blocks and they strap him into place. So there Steve is in front of 30 or 40 of his fellow classmates as the teachers demonstrate that a person properly secured is safe and how any further damage is minimized. While he's completely immobile, his out-of-control adolescent male body does what it does best. He slowly starts to get an erection in front of his classmates. At first the teachers don't notice it because they are talking to and facing the audience of kids. Me and my friends see it happening, but what the fuck can you do? We see Steve. His face beat red and his eyes slammed shut as if he were trying to will his dick limp, but was of no use. He was at full mast for a good 30 to 45 seconds with most of his male and female classmates witnessing his shame. I forget exactly how that specific class ended, but the teachers eventually unstrapped him and I think he ran into the locker room. He changed schools shortly afterward. TLDR, so much blood. I'm in class and my instructor was obviously not feeling well. I mentioned to the person next to me, he looks a little rough, doesn't he? He's trying to keep it together and then says, break up into your discussion groups. So we all get into like 5-person groups and start discussing whatever it was we were talking about, and I look up at the instructor who had sat down, white as a sheet. I watch him pass out while seated, then throw up all over himself while passed out. Class dismissed. When I was in 5th grade my teacher had a heart attack. We thought he was fucking with us, so we didn't do anything till he was stone cold on the ground for half an hour. Then we all started flipping out and another teacher got the principal and called 911. In high school a white kid I know named Colin was in the basketball team. One day he got the bright idea to go outside after school and practice. The gangbangers that sit outside were offended that a white kid would play on their court, and beat him retarded with a chain. I was in JROTC and was running laps around the track for orienteering, when we heard the whooping and hollering as they beat this kid senseless. We called the police immediately, but due to a shootout several blocks away, they didn't show up till the ambulance had come and gone. None of the perps were ever caught. Colin lives in an assisted living home now.